Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. I have a really fun and informational show in store for you all today. I have some ladies that happen to be relatives that I picked up along the way. Now, I just met them recently over the past week, and it has been an amazing experience. I shared with you guys in previous shows, and I'm not sure if it was on this show or my other show. I had Essie Patha come in, and okay, so it must have been on my other show, Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen, Sundays at 6 p.m. live on KISS 107.1 WTLZ.com. But we're here at United States of Gray. I have these women with us on today, and we are going to talk about something that I've shared. I know I've spoken with it, haven't I? I have my studio in the studio with my producer, Jonathan, with me. John,
hello.
We've spoken with it before, correct? Have we spoken about it before?
Yeah, we talked about. I know that you were
planning to go.
That's the last I heard, and then you dropped off the face of the earth for a couple weeks. And
a man must
have
some time. Yeah. So we're back with guests, and so we have recovered. They let me return. We've talked about it. The GU, Georgetown University 272. We'll talk about what that means once again to give greater clarity. And then we're also going to talk about something called the Southern Maryland Descendants Gathering. And I don't want to waste any more time because we have a lot to talk about on today. I see you all that are showing up in our social media stream, but I would love to bring in the ladies, bring them on. I want to introduce you all to my family, to my cousins. We have Julie Hawkins Ennis. Hello, Julie.
Hey, Kareem. How are you?
What's up, cuz?
What's up, cousin?
And we also have Henrietta Pike. Henrietta, how are you doing? Now we lost you. I think you muted yourself, Henrietta.
Mute yourself.
Of course. Hello, Kareem. Hi, everybody. Hi, Julie.
And also there is we're having some problems. I'm not sure if she's where our ancestors came from or what's going on, but that's about what her social media
Did she ever make it home?
Yeah, but we're also going to hear from Rochelle Sanders Prater. She's currently having some difficulties with her connection, but we'll hear from her soon. Ladies, I want to jump right into our conversation. Once Rochelle is back, we'll bring her back in and allow you all to hear from her. Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America.
Thank you.
And I know you guys are probably like, we have no idea. They have seen one show, but we talk about conversations on race, and it may be a plethora of issues. But today I'm excited that we're going to talk about something that's very dear to my heart. As we talk about the GU 272 project and the Southern Maryland Descendants Gathering, which took place on last week. I want to say this before we get started. We often talk about slavery. We talk about injustice. We talk about racism. We talk about everything under the sun that is pertinent to that conversation on race in America. We've even talked about the evolution of race as a social construct. But today we're going to have a conversation really that is exciting. When I was a kid, I'm gonna say this. When I was a kid growing up, I must have been about 12 years old. I got into a fight with this little white kid. And he said to me, as we were exchanging, we're talking, bluffing out one another. He said to me, go back to Africa. And after getting his good beat down, after that, it was something, the things that happen to us and that we hear as kids have a way of staying with us for a lifetime. And what that did to me is I continually, in my mind and in my heart, I carried around this feeling of, wow, I don't know where I came from. And so this weekend has been an amazing event. It has impacted me, what I experienced on last week, in a way I never thought that it would. I received something that I never thought that I could. And I felt a sense of home. We're going to bring in Rochelle Sanders Prater, if she's in here. Rochelle, are you here?
There she is.
I'm here. I'm having extreme difficulty, technical difficulty, but I am here.
Okay, she's here with us now. I would just love, Henrietta, I want to talk with you. When we talk about GU 272, let's start there. The way that I found out about it is that my cousin Epatha was on our cousin Epatha was on Finding Our Roots. She sent me a message saying that she was going to be on there, and the family watched, and we were all amazed together. What has happened since that show, and what we did not know what was happening before, is that folks who were part of the Georgetown 272, and I want you to explain what that means in your explanation, have been coming together and meeting and pulling pieces together. Share a little bit about what GU 272 is, and then also what has been happening in terms of bringing those who are the descendants of those 272 together.
Okay, Kareem, let me explain how I found out about the GU
Okay.
272. You know that is more Georgetown sold more than 272 enslaved people. They were the Society of Jesus who had these enslaved people, and Georgetown was failing. One of their missions was to provide education. So Georgetown College was failing at that time, and they decided to go ahead and sell more than 272 enslaved people. And they happened to be our ancestors in Southern Maryland. So my ancestor, Rochelle's ancestor, Julie's ancestors was sold down to Louisiana. And
Well, mine won.
because of
Yeah, go ahead.
yours, well, okay.
We're the ones
So
that stayed.
some of us stayed
Well, not
behind,
stayed.
and
We
mine
won.
was stayed behind also. So Louisa Mahoney was on the bill of sale, but she was told by a neighboring priest to hide in the woods. And that's what she did. She hid in the woods. So, but Louisa's brothers and sisters, all of them went and were sold, and we were separated. There we go. It's all on the separation of families. There
Okay.
were several families.
All right. I just want to make a distinction so that those that are listening understand what they're listening to. Julie, you stepped in and you said some of us were left behind. we
Well,
want
I
to
don't go ahead.
Yes.
all of us were brought into slavery, and I want to talk about that because I found even the trace from the America shores back to our native land. I found that out as well.
Right.
But what you were saying is that there were 272 slaves that were slated to be sold. They were on that bill of sale. And I wanted you to take it from there, Julie, as you shared about how the separation between those that actually ended up in Iberville, Maryland, Louisiana, and then those who remained. Go ahead, share.
So our story is different and the same, and I kind of am adopting myself as the voice of Southern Maryland people, because first of all, we knew nothing. Those of us who did not get sold away, or those of us even from families of free people of color, because one of my families is free people of color that live right next door or right in the same area as Newtown Manor, but we connect. And one of the things we used to hear in our family, my grandfather would tell me that according to his great grandmother, some of us were sold down the river, and I never understood what that meant. My story about how I found out about this was, of course, I told you, you heard my story, Kareem, about how on Ancestry I was connecting to people down in the Deep South. And those of us in Southern Maryland, we knew for a fact we were from Maryland. We didn't come up to Maryland through the migration and all of that. We were the native original families of Southern Maryland. And like I mentioned to you, my roots go back, to the settlers, to the Native Americans, the Piscataway, and this GU 272 families. But when this first came out, they concentrated more on those who were sold to Louisiana, right? And that's all you heard was the families that were sold away. And then finally, I started thinking, well, wait a minute. If they were sold away, that means we lost family. And as I described at the event, I remember watching Roots, and one of the scenes that always stayed with me, and I was in third grade when I think third or first, maybe first, I'm giving my age right. Man, when I saw that, I remember that scene was so traumatic to see this kid being stripped from his mother to be sold away. That's how I looked at you all. I mean, of the GU 272. I can't pick out. I haven't figured out who yet may have been taken down to Louisiana at this point. I don't think there was anybody. I just think we connect to those families because although it wasn't my family per se, or that was sold down, like Rochelle and Henrietta have names. We just have the fact that we connect, and I explained, there were kits that Georgetown had put on Ancestry, and I connect on both my mother and my father's side to Yorkshire. And first of all, there's surnames that were looked at that what am I trying to say, that could almost point to the fact that you were connected to the GU 272, or you had families that were sold away. There were several names, but my surnames, I'm a Hawkins first of all, and I think I'm a Hawkins. My grandmother was Barnes. My grandfather's family, they were actually Coons, but I just found out they were also Jones. They were the free people of color, which now all this is making sense because the Jones were connected to the Masons. Louisa Mahoney married a Mason, and the Masons were free people of color.
Julie, let's interject a point here so that, because this conversation, and I want to say this, and I want to be very clear about this particular platform, this radio show. Now I have another show that's on an urban show, that's on an urban station, where we talking to folks, Black folks largely. Okay. This platform airs on a station which is not particularly not Black, and it's a very conservative station. Right. So this is our opportunity to really share. A great part of bringing forth history is the storytelling, right, and the narrative that is given. And I want to make sure that we spend some time really educating the listeners on the narrative and the true stories that came out of this. Right. Now, you said that your enslaved family members lived right next door to free folks who were free Black folks at that time. And so I want the world to understand that Black folks in America have not always been slaves. Right. And, Maryland has a long history of having, people always thought it was just Louisiana and New Orleans, but we in Maryland have a large list of free people of color. But that didn't mean we were treated much better. I mean, just like that we could do our own thing. I don't even want to say we could do our own thing. We just weren't owned. We weren't owned by anybody. So there's a book out called I forgot what it's called.
The 272. Rachel Swan's book did an excellent job of giving us a insight and a picture of what the life of a free person during that time. Louisa's husband, Alex Mason, was a free person of color, but his life was not as you would think it was. In fact, he was murdered. As he was going on his merry way, trying to go and make a living for his family. So it is not what we think it is when we talk about being free. It's just that he always had to travel with his papers, right? Right. So it wasn't like freedom to move and freedom to stay and freedom to do everything you wanted to do. But I just wanted to clarify regarding the comments regarding the people group, if you will. There are several descendant groups that connect to this Jesuit enslaved history. Right. GU 272 Louisiana and GU 272 Maryland, right? Yes. And the reason why and how it got so much attention is because of the students at Georgetown, when they found out the history, as they were performing some work in translating old documents, they realized that the Jesuits not only had owned enslaved people, but actually found the documentation, the articles of agreement that was signed on June 19th, 1838. Where it listed the names and said the number listed with the other inventories, if you will, pigs, chickens, you name it. And so that's where that came from. And I like to share with people in America in general that this concept of the GU-272 was but a pebble in the steel pond of history, and it has created a ripple effect of history, right? So we recognize initially when it first came out, it felt like and it seemed like that it was like a clearance sale and that was it. But then our critical thinking skills, at least for me, the critical thinking skills say, wait a minute, Rochelle, this was 1838. Slavery was not over with until 1865. So there had to be relatives left there in Maryland. I didn't know how or where or what. But that was the way we looked at it. I also would like to take a second and just say the other descendant groups include a group that went to Grand Coteau like in 1829 or 30. They were taken from Maryland, and the Jesuits gave them to the Order of Saint, what was their name? The Order of Saint, uh, what was the lady? Sacred Heart, the sisters in Grand Coteau, Louisiana. So we have that descendant group of descent. Then we have another group. I know for sure that date was 1830. They took a group of 6 individuals to St. Louis to help build the mission in Florestan, Missouri.
I mean, Rochelle, let me interject really quickly, because what we have to understand with the projects of an emerging nation coming forth, we understood where the work was. We are going to see a transition and a movement, a mobilization of slave labor. So this is the normality of what was taking place. I think one of the interesting parts of this is the role, and I'm going to come back to you in a minute, Julia, when I want to hear what my cousin Henrietta wants to say. I think one of the interesting things is I think the thing that they're there is the fact that this was Jesuit priests. These were Catholic priests.
Yes.
Who were a part of this process. And Henrietta, there's a point that you've been wanting to make. I want you to make sure you get it out, because you look like I've been trying to explain.
No, these two are talkers. I'll tell you that right now. But just to get back to the history in the Mahoney family, and this is something that I didn't know, is that they actually sued for their freedom. They sued John Ashton for their freedom, and they had court cases which took over a decade. It was Charles, Patrick, Daniel. They sued, and that was based at the White Marsh down in. And what's so amazing is it's right here in Maryland. So when I go and I read the court cases, I'm saying those are my great uncles who are suing for their freedom. They describe them as mulatto men. They describe them as talking eloquently. Being a Mahoney, I can look at the records and I can see my ancestors there giving them a lot of pain and
Henrietta, I got a question. The question that I'm asking from and I don't want to get into separated groups, but I want to talk about these as a package. What enabled your ancestors to be able to sue? Let's talk about that.
It's the Mahonies, it's the Queens. I think it may have been the Times. I'm still trying to find that out. I just know that they are strong people, and they have always been talked about in the priestly papers that went back to the Pope.
Okay.
Back at that times.
Yeah. Hold on. I want someone to answer this question. Some of the people that came across on these ships, we're finding out now that the Margaret was the ship that many of our people came over on, right? Some of the individuals that were on other ships were indentured servants.
Right.
An indentured servant is someone who owes a debt, so to
And
speak.
Joyce was one of them, and she was one of my ancestors back in the late 1600s. And then that is part of the Mahoney narrative.
I get
Green
that.
narrative has the same thing.
But
Marietta.
now you're getting into Southern Maryland history.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was always
Okay, and we have lost her, but she'll come back. This is my question that I want to make sure that we're making clear.
Right.
So many people came over as indentured servants. We had folks that were indentured servants from Ireland and wherever they came from. There were also blacks who came over as indentured servants, correct?
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay, when they got here, and I think that this may be the groundwork, and this is taking us away. So if y'all would allow me to travel,
Right.
It comes in. It comes in.
So these indentured servants were promised by this new country, the colony, right? That after so many years and you've paid off your debt, we're going to give you 50 acres. Sound familiar, Black America?
Right.
We're going to
40 acres.
What's that?
40
acres.
Yeah. So we're going to give you this land that you can then be free with. And I think that one of the issues was, and probably for many of the slaves, after we've paid our debt to society, as you will, we have a right to this acreage. We have a right to be free, and if not given, so I think that's a part of it. But my of why they were able to sue. But my question, and I want to go back to this. When you guys collectively, how did you all find? I want to know the story of how you all found each other, and then how you all were able to begin this Southern Maryland gathering, and why we use that name over any other name.
Can I speak? So again, when this came out, folks in Southern Maryland didn't have a clue about it, right? I grew up Catholic, Kareem. I grew up in that area that you.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to bring that up.
I am a Black Catholic. We grew up in Catholic school. You just witnessed that our whole community, Catholicism was not just a religion; it was a lifestyle for us. Okay, we went to Catholic school. We practiced all the Catholic traditions. And in school, as I told you, we learned about all the Maryland history that we could ever learn, but we never heard about Jesuit enslavement. My teachers were Jesuits and nuns. The people I went to church with were Jesuits and nuns. And I'm gonna be honest, they supported us. I grew up in the time when, the Catholic Church was very much like American society. Somebody said, well, how could Catholic Church do this? They, practiced the same things that were going on in America at that time, meaning when my parents were going to Catholic church, we were together, but you were in the back, or, whites got communion first and we got it second, but we were still together, right? So
race has found a way to infiltrate every area.
Yes.
Right.
That's why I made the point, on my journey with this, I kind of made, and you heard me, I made the point that, people, now, some people are very upset with Catholics, and I get it, but it wasn't just the Catholics that did this. Or any institution that was a part of America did this as well. Okay, they sold enslaved.
Yep.
Yeah, But for me, like I said, how I figured it out was when they were talking about these enslaved persons being sold to, first of all, it shocked me, because out of everything, I was hoping that the Jesuits or the priests who claimed to be close to God, and closer to God than many, that this is something that they would have never taken part in. At the time, like I told you, my kids were just entering into Catholic high school when I found out about this. And it hurt me to my core that this is what was going on in Southern Maryland. Now we knew I had already known, and my family had already known about the lawsuits that took place. But let me tell you,
Julie, I want you to hold that thought. We're going to come back to that. You talking about the lawsuits. We're going to take our first commercial break. We'll be back in just 17 short seconds or so. We'll be back in just a couple minutes. I want you guys to stay tuned for more United Shades of Grey.
So you want to know how we met, how we came to this history, and how we got to past weekend, Kareem?
Get to that.
Yeah, get to that, Julie, please.
Okay. I know you're not talking. All over the place.
So cute.
You're listening to United Shades of Grey on WSGW.
This is Kareem, and you're back with more United Shades of Grey, Conversations of Race in America. Before the commercial break, we were talking with three lovely women who happen to be my cousin from another mother, but we are all related and kinfolk. Julie Hawkins Ennis, Henrietta Pike, Rochelle Sanders Prater. And before the commercial break, Julie, you were talking about being aware of the lawsuits that folks of color have had against the colony. Yep, go ahead.
We were aware of that. Actually, I became aware of it in the 90s. And maybe if I was as smart as one of the authors that wrote a book, I would have done the same thing, and I'm not going to put the name out there. But I remember discovering that. But I also remember in our family, there was a certain, I don't know, pride, a certain, I don't even know how to describe it, that pretty much we took no prisoners in Southern Maryland. You talk about those lawsuits in my family. There's lawsuits about the United States colored troops they sold, and my grandmother got the money. It was always that aggressive press for freedom, and I do think it comes from the fact that a lot of people did start out in Maryland free, in some instances, as and especially after the Revolutionary War, a lot of African Americans became free, or blacks became free. But it was something about just our strength, and the fact that like Henrietta said, the Mahonies who sued. I mean, this is all making sense now, even with some of the history I know about my family. But how we all met was when this came out. For me, I'm gonna talk from my side. The descendants, GU272 descendants, started meeting in Maryland, and one of the areas was Bowie. I was paying attention to this because of my surnames. I was trying to figure out how we connected, if I had family that had been sold down to Louisiana. So when I met, I think that's when I met Rochelle. I met Rochelle at that time. And then, it just kept ringing with me that, wait a minute, I was kind of one of a few Southern Maryland people at these events. It was several others, but I think those other Southern Maryland families their families were on that list that were sold to Louisiana. But mine weren't, but I connected. Connected. So that's when I started thinking, wait a minute, we lost family. So I really started pushing. I know people were gone and left Southern Maryland, but you all left family and we lost family, right? So that's when I kind of met Rochelle. And Rochelle and I had discussed early on, before we met Henrietta, about doing some type of bringing the families together. I mean, it was early, I don't know, Rochelle, when we first met. It was the first time, too, when we met at Newtown Manor, because she would come to Maryland. My family lives in Southern Maryland, as you know, Kareem. They're still there. And Rochelle would come to Southern Maryland, call me and say, hey, come over here and meet me. I'm here. And
Rochelle is she's not
afraid.
One who has strangers and not afraid. Absolutely.
She is.
So the second time we met, that's when I met Henrietta and her brother. And that discussion came up again about, maybe we should try, and for me personally, I wanted to bring everybody back home. It tore my heart apart. I'm getting ready to tear up now.
Well, Julie, with your Facebook page, you brought a lot of people together years ago. You've been doing it all of your life.
Yeah, it tore me apart every time I thought about the fact that, number one, we didn't know this took place. And Kareem, I'm thinking we didn't know because as generations went on, how in Black families, I found this out even in mine. They don't like talking about the negative, okay? How sometimes we find this out and find that out. I'm thinking the reason why
that's Julie, I'm glad you said that, because other folk, our light-skinned counterparts, tend to think that we want to dwell on these negative things.
No, we don't.
But the reality of it is my grandparents and folks, they didn't want to deal with this stuff. Slavery was a bad thing, and they wanted to look at the positive.
Right.
I want to make a transition real quick. You were talking about your connection to Rochelle. Now, my understanding and seeing Rochelle in action is that Rochelle is the people connector. I met her and work that my family had been doing for years was kind of stopping with my great grandmother and her mother. And in about 15 minutes of meeting Rochelle, and this was I was telling Henrietta, she laid the entire plan out. And what she didn't know, she introduced me to her father and then to cousin Joe, who lives right here in Michigan.
Right.
And they put the tree that was bare bones, looked like it had just come through a winter, had now grown branches and leaves and color. Rochelle, how did you get involved with this? I call it a fight to bring people together, as Julie said. How did you get involved, and what has your role been in bringing these GU 272 people together?
Thank you for your question. I can very say, and that may sound very crazy, but it is a true calling.
Yep.
It is a divine intervention. Life in my work career, some strange things had happened. I don't need to go into that at this point, but God put me literally in a place that when that article broke with cousin Maxine Crump on April 16th, I was available and I was willing and I was ready. I was raw and ready for it.
I want to interject really quick because you just said the name Maxine Crump. Those who Kareem Bowen share the lineage, the connection, because one of my great aunts. Go ahead, share it.
Okay. So cousin Maxine Crump, when I saw that article, I knew she was the Crump connection to my family, but I didn't know the Hawkins connection.
Right.
So cousin Maxine is a descendant of Neely Hawkins, which is Patrick and Letty Hawkins. I would have to take additional view at her tree to see the connection to your family.
Mildred.
But cousin Mildred Crump was married to cousin Alton Crump, and they literally live right next door to us.
And so Kareem, Crump is my great aunt. I grew up going down to Maryland.
Correct.
Oh, that's a connection.
And your great grandmother, Miss Pearl, everybody knew Miss Pearl. She lived across the bayou. Mama Pearl lived across the bayou from us. So I never got the pleasure of meeting you, Kareem, but I was very much aware of all the Bowen all my life, right? In Maryland, I grew up in Maryland. Even as Julie said, I will tell you the same kind of dynamics that exists with Julie, with people in her little town not knowing each other and understanding the connections. That is that same thing exists in Maryland as well as Donaldsonville and Homer. The Hawkins family, the Isaac Hawkins children, was spread out throughout Louisiana, and we don't know if they ever got to reconnect with each other or not. I would hope that they did, because my direct connection, Jackson was 3 years old when they arrived in Louisiana, and so he is my great grandfather. Had no idea, had never heard his name. He's buried right there in Immaculate Heart of Mary Catholic Graveyard. Can't figure out what happened to Patrick nor Letty. However, I suspect that they may be buried in Patrick may be in the New Orleans cemetery, and it looks like Letty may have went to Kentucky.
Wow.
To reunite with her Blacklock family. I'm still searching that out and trying to get confirmation.
Okay, I want to do this really quickly because we can get into these family and I see family members that are like, wow, this is amazing. This is what we experienced on last week. You didn't give us any chance to really acclimate. We came in and bam, oh, this is who you're related to. And it was amazing. The thing that makes this so exciting for those that are listening is that for so long, I would talk to my white counterparts and they could say, oh, my great grandfather was this. They came over to England or, even wherever it was, and they could trace their patterns. We have never been able to do this. And in my family, Ann Bowen and John Bowen, who came north, my grandfather and great aunt, they both left. They were the only two in the north, and we rarely went back for family reunions and gatherings. But Isaac Hawkins, who was the first name on that bill of sale, is my fifth great grandfather. And so when we look at this relationship, these are the same names. I want to talk about last week. On last week, let's shift our conversation to the Southern Maryland Descendants Gathering. All right. For those who are listening, this was from Wednesday to Sunday. It was a life. Was it Wednesday? Yeah, because people were coming in on
Wednesday.
People came in
Thursday.
Well,
Yeah.
It started Thursday
many of
morning.
us planners got there Wednesday
Wednesday.
night, but the tours they started on Thursday morning.
Henrietta, why don't you tell us, give us an overview of those tours, and then we'll talk about them a little bit with the time we have left.
Okay. So it all took place in Southern Maryland because that's where this all began, was in Southern Maryland. So that's what was our hub down in St. Mary's County. And we started off Thursday morning by going to St. Ignatius Chapel Field in Port Tobacco, Maryland. We went there, and then from there we went to Sacred Heart, and we got a presentation there and a tour of their cemetery over at White Marsh. That was one of their biggest Jesuits plantations. And that's what we did that day. And then on Friday, we started off with St. Ignatius in St. Indigo's, Maryland. And that also included Priest Point, and that's where the manor house was for that particular plantation. And that's where some of the Barnes and the Mahoney's were down in that, just to name a few surnames. And then from there, we went over to the Afro-American Museum, and that was located near St. Peter Claver's Church. It was right there on their grounds, and that was one of the first historic Black parishes that broke away back in the early 1900s. So we went there to St. Peter Claver's Afro-American Museum, and then in the afternoon we went up to Julie's spot in Newtown, and we viewed that plantation and had a presentation. And each day we had a marvelous lunch. So I thought that was one of the high points too.
But, let me tell you about that. Let me say this. And I just got to say this about my people. I was so glad y'all didn't give us fried chicken the first day. I was like, good Lord, we're not going to be our own, But, every time
we waited.
They give me eat fried chicken. Well, I ain't gonna lie. I snuck me some fried chicken on Tuesday, on Wednesday, and on Thursday. I had fried chicken both days. I'm sorry.
Is that what I was smelling on the bus? Was your fried chicken?
Okay. And can I just
Dude, go ahead, Judy. I want to let you make your point, but I want you to also include this. I want you to include. I found out, and you may have already known, that the first church in the first Catholic church. Let's talk a little bit about that first Catholic church and White Marsh. Go ahead and say what you're going to say, Julie.
Oh, I was going to say, the tours actually included not only the missions in St. Mary's County, but of course, if you notice, you traveled through 3 counties: St. Mary's, Charles County, and into Prince George's County. And in Southern Maryland, because of those borders, our families intertwine in all of those counties, and also the missions. Southern Maryland includes St. Mary's County, Charles County, Calvert County, and Southern Prince George's County. So the hubs, as Henrietta said, were St. Mary's, and I guess she means hubs where the families were sold from the missions, were St. Mary's, Charles County, Southern Prince George's County. Did I miss anything? So
I want to talk about the first Catholic church, because when I found out that White Marsh Plantation was also the site of the first Catholic church, and let's talk about the make of that church, how that came to be, and the first bishop. Go ahead, Julie.
You mean you're talking about in St. Mary's, like St. Ignatius, for the first?
No. At White Marsh Plantation, the first church.
Oh,
talking about
Chapel Hill.
Which one are you talking about?
The first church that we went to is Chapel Hill.
Oh, you mean as far as the visit? Yeah.
No.
No. I know what you're talking about.
No, let me explain. Let me explain. When we got to White Marsh Plantation and they did their description, and we went and we saw their grave site, they were saying that the Catholic Church was not allowed to practice here in the States. But
that was Newtown. That was Newtown Manor. When we were at Newtown Manor, and he was saying that at the time, even when, all right, so the history of Maryland and how Catholicism started in Maryland
Yeah.
was that Catholics were discriminated in England. They hated them, didn't want them there. And, so that's how the settlement in England came about, was because the Baltimores, Lord Calvert and his crew came over to St. Mary's County and settled for religious freedom. But even in the beginning, there was some, dislike for Catholics. So for Catholics to, do their services and masses, they had to hide. And Newtown Manor, they were describing how, normally a Catholic church, and actually this is something he pointed out to me, we always have a middle aisle. There's always a middle aisle. And Newtown Manor, that church was built as a meeting house, so that when Catholics got together to do their mass, they wouldn't be discovered. So that was one of many first Catholic churches in the area. But I think that's what you're talking about, Kareem, when he described how, they pretty much, they were being discriminated against, pretty much.
What were you going to say, Rochelle? I'm sorry.
I was just gonna mention that little at White Marsh was that little chapel in the back of the church, and that was Bishop John Carroll was the first bishop that was ordained, and that's where he was at White Marsh. Perhaps that might have been what you were referring to.
That what you were referring.
That's what I was referring
to.
Now I want to talk about also, because this caught me, because this was all a part of our first day. Y'all didn't ease us into this, but on the first Descendants-led tour that we did, which was on the first day, location at White Marsh, explain to us or share with our listeners the story about the cemetery and why we went there and what we saw.
Well, originally when we started this project, we were just going to limit it to Saint Ignatius and Saint Indigo's in Newtown. However, they have been doing some things up there at White Marsh, and it is descendant led. We are trying to honor our ancestors. They have a big cemetery there. If you notice, cemeteries, they always have the top level that's all clean and mowed and flowers. And then if you look off to the distance, you'll see a part that is sloping down, overgrown weeds, whatever. Well, during the last winter, they started up there at White Marsh with a cemetery cleanup. Their historical committee decided that, hey, let's get together, let's get some descendants along with the archaeologists. There's a big program out there to clean that cemetery, to find our ancestors. We have walked through those cemeteries, have identified markers, have done ground penetrating radar, so that we can find out just where our ancestors are. And they're usually at that part of the cemetery where it's sloping. So we walk those hills through all of that. And out of that comes the White Marsh Historical Society, which is descendant led, and they announced their debut during our tour, and that was historic also. They are a nonprofit, and they received us so well. I think that was one of the best parts of the tour, their presentation. They were descendants. What was so amazing is that the descendants were there. They may not have been on the bus, because not every, they were there. They were there to receive us, and they welcomed us to White Marsh, and that was pretty dear to my heart. So I really liked how we all connected on the bus, Kareem. I just have to say that real quickly before we run out of time. I think you guys did a great job, and it's good to hear how it affected you. And all the other descendants. So, we couldn't have planned this any better. The interactions between all the descendants, the finding the connections. If we had even planned to have a genealogist talk to you, that many of us have that skill. So it was good to hear that kind of feedback. And again, I'm going to make another plug, our survey. Okay.
Get the survey out.
I think what you're asking is, did you ask what led us to Sacred Heart? Is that what you is why we?
No. Actually, you're talking about
the question you just asked.
Yeah,
about what,
absolutely.
Well, first of all, I think the reason I was on this committee because I was trying to ensure that when you say Southern Maryland, it doesn't just include St. Inigo's. It includes St. Inigo's, Newtown Manor, and St. Mary's County, Charles County, Port Tobacco, St. Thomas Manor, and Sacred Heart, Prince George's County. That's where all of you all's families were sold from, And I found out recently, my parish, and when I say parish for us, that means churches, not Louisiana like y'all have, I guess, parishes and counties or whatever. I'm talking about our church. My parish was St. Aloysius in Leonardtown, Maryland. Actually, remember we drove, I drove you by my house. It was in that area. Yep. Well, I found out that Sacred Heart and St. Aloysius, well, actually, Sacred Heart is a branch of St. Aloysius. I didn't know that until about 3 weeks ago, and I was talking to Father Russo. So now I'm really starting to think that there really was some huge connection with not only the missions, with the Catholic churches, total, and doing what they did. Now, it's still complicated. It's still a history that we're still researching as far as the Jesuits are concerned, because of course, everybody's just learned about it, and we're trying to get them to talk about it, Kareem, as you saw at one of our discussions. I think was right.
I'm gonna tell you all the truth. What happened? The first church we went to was not descendant led. Right. I'm not going to say the father's name. God bless his cotton socks, whatever it is. But we got there, and dude was trying to give us history, and he said something that I could no longer be silent on. Right. And though you know me, I'm a straight shooter, straight talk. Right. He started talking about how people are talking about how history's changed. We're not changing history. It's just a different picture, a different viewpoint. Like, dude, when names are being erased. And what I need people to understand is that the GU 272, the reason why it was epic was because one of the things is that the sale was hidden, and records were destroyed. Thank God to Georgetown's record room. Right. So history has been changed, and we see today things that happened then are causing those same effects to take place. I want to thank you, ladies, for being a part of today's show. I'm going to bring you back because we're really on the precipice. This is only the beginning, a small piece of what's happening. But I want to talk about how the Catholic Church, the Jesuits, what they're doing, because they are doing some things. We in terms of you can't make up for the past, but making some attritions to some things and some funds that are being created. How can people contact you all? What's the best way if someone wants to know if they're a part of GU 272? Who's the best person? What's the best contact?
Rochelle.
I guess that's me.
Yes.
I guess that's me. I am the executive director for the GU 272 Descendants Association. And I do want to clarify that, yes, the name is GU 272, but it includes all descendants of enslaved. We are in the process as an organization of revisiting our brand, if you will, so that people are clear and understood that includes everyone. Also, I am on the board of the Descendants Truth and Reconciliation Foundation, which was established on behalf of our descendants.
We get those numbers and contact. We got to get numbers and contact.
Okay, numbers and contact. Well, best contact is website gu272.net for the association, and descendants.org for the foundation. I do want to say one more thing before you go. Kareem, you are connected to Henrietta. You are a Butler descendant. And Bibiana Mahoney Butler was Louisa Mahoney's sister. So everybody Maryland.
Yes.
Okay, ladies, we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we get off the air. I want to thank you guys for tuning in always. We'll see you next week with more United Shades of Gray.
Thank you.
Peace, everybody, and love.
Love, peace. Kareem, I wanted to say that with the attrition, what you saw was an example, and this tour actually taught me something.
Okay, ladies, they can still hear us in the social media stream, so this ain't just us family, it's the whole family. Okay. But go ahead.
Now, I figured that as far as the attrition, You saw as an example at the first church about this history either not being known or not being shared. And I remember when you all got back on the bus and everybody was a little, what just happened here? And I explained to you, when we go to Sacred Heart, you will see a difference because the descendants are involved. And you also have, I hate to not to age discriminate or none of that. Father Clifford was an older priest, okay, kind of set in his ways. As he was talking to us, I felt like he was talking at you all and not with you all. And I don't know if you remember, I kind of interceded and said, look, hold on, I forgot to tell you, you're talking to a group of people who are very educated and versed in their Catholic enslaved history. And when we went to Sacred Heart, you saw a total different scene.
Yes.
But that is because descendants are getting involved. People like myself in Southern Maryland are trying to get, I'm going to go back and talk to Father Clifford. I actually talked to his assistant. We had been there before, me and my cousin talking to him. And for some people, and even the priests, it is hard to accept that they did this, And you can see it's very hard for them to accept this. But that's what my mission is. That's what our mission is to make this it's history. It's American history. And it's one part of American history that needs to be told. And you're not going to change it, script it,
And we have to be involved with that narrative and how it's
being told. Yes.
So we have to be able to tell our own stories. And I think that's very important. I want to say this to you ladies while we're still on a social stream, but we're off our radio program. I just want to say this, and I put it in writing. This past week has changed me in a way that nothing else since I've been on this planet has, with the exception of salvation. So much of my life, I've always, me as a person and my family knows, I'm talking to old folks, trying to find out history. Knowing where I came from was so important. To be able to be connected, because this part of the family, the only relatives we knew were my aunt, great aunt Anne in Detroit, which Epatha is her mom, and so a family reunion was when they drove up from Detroit to see my grandfather. But being able to come back, and Julie, you said this on the platform, and this is where we're getting back to that. You said people had talked about slaves being taken away, but you guys were left behind. And what we realized is that we were taken to a foreign place while you guys remained in the place, which was technically home. And so seeing us come back was like bringing everyone back home, us home. And in that moment, man, it felt more like home than a lot of things and a lot of places I've been. And I say this, I've shared with you, with all of the people that we were with, we laughed, we cried, we fellowshiped, and the experience was so amazing. So I want to say to anyone who is a part of an enslaved group, whether it's the Jesuits or whomever it might be, to take the time to get reconnected, because you filled in the gaps. Now, in terms of your boy Kareem, I not only found my family, my cousins, Rochelle, who's a very, very close cousin, and cousin Joe, who's right in Battle Creek. This is crazy. Just inside the state.
Kareem, can I say this too?
Yeah, let me finish.
I always got a lot to say, but
go ahead.
When we organized this, I purposely included St. Peter Claver. I remember telling them I want to do this during Labor Day weekend, and the reason why I did it is because that event that you were at, I don't know if you came on Sunday, that's traditional in our community for Black Catholics. Now, although my parish is St. Aloysius, normally the Black Catholics, the Black community get together at that Labor Day party just to commune and talk about, the historic Black schools, as you saw, that were there. I did that on purpose because I didn't want to just meet or bring you all back to talk about Southern Maryland people at a table in a library. I wanted you to see who your kinfolk were in action. And that's why it was important to me. And I don't even know if I really expressed this to Rochelle and Henrietta, that you saw them. And because, I was getting so much, opposition to being Black Catholic, I wanted you all to see what Black Catholics were about, and I wanted you all to see that, that's all we knew. Oh, I don't know why. Well, that's all we knew. And, I don't have a problem being a Black Catholic, because as my ancestors did, and as my mom and them did, my grandmother, do know we took up the cause as Black Catholics. Do know that. Some people would, oh, you're a traitor, you're a traitor, you're this. No, that's all I knew. That's all I knew. I didn't know anything about any other religion until I left St. Mary's County. When I went to college, I had no idea I was a rarity. I'm like, well, you're Black Catholic. Yeah. I mean, no, you must have converted. No, that's no. So the reason I did that, Kareem, is so that y'all could truly feel your people and in your home place and where you were from.
Right. I certainly thank you, ladies. This has been such a great pleasure. And for those who are listening, those Bowen, I saw some of them in the social media stream, found out the Margaret was the name of the ship that our folks came over on, all the way back to the coast of Sierra Leone, Bonce Island. So it was a wonderful occasion. I cannot wait till the next time we get together. Rochelle, we got you on that survey. It is coming. And God bless you all. Love you, family.
Thank you.
Love you.
Bye-bye.